Hi, welcome to this Kaplan Masterclass on key exam technique. This session is particularly aimed at students who are sitting objective test exams and want a few hints and tips on how to make sure you spot that right answer in a multiple choice question. So let's consider what we will try to achieve in this session. Our key exam techniques will include the following areas. Firstly, and it's important for every exam, we need to understand what is the question asking us, because sometimes a small change in the wording of the question completely turns the answer upside down. So this session will help you to pay attention to those words in the question. Also, there's been objective test, multiple choice exam. There is a right and the wrong answer. So by eliminating certain answers that are clearly wrong, you have a higher chance of getting that answer right. There could also be some distractors like odd options from which you need to choose. So by getting rid of those distractors, getting rid of those decoys examiners putting in, you'll be able to focus on the right options. And sometimes you do need to make an educated guess, but how to improve the quality of your guessing, that was the session is going to help you with. Finally, in some papers, scenarios in objective test questions are longer. And as a result, we need to understand how do you deal with the time pressure in those wordy scenarios. It is also very important to move on. Objective test exams will contain a number of questions, and it is important that we attempt every single question to maximize our chances of passing the exam. Finally, at the end, we're going to introduce ourselves to a few study tips that will help us to keep ourselves on track and progress in the right direction. So let's now look at those techniques one by one, and we're going to use a variety of different questions to demonstrate how those techniques work. So our first technique relates to understanding the question itself. Let's now consider the question on the screen in front of you. And if you skim read it very quickly, go, okay, what about preparing for the exam? Of course, I need to revise, and getting an early night is a good idea. Sometimes I have to chance and guess. And of course, attending the course should also help to immerse in the material. So what is the right answer? But that issue arises because we've just skim read the question. We have not considered it fully. And if you read it again and carefully, you'll realize that when the question is asking you about your exam preparations, it's actually asking you which is not an appropriate way to prepare for the exam. And this little word, not just 3 letters, completely turns the question around. You go, okay, so what should I not be doing when preparing for the exam? Clearly revising makes sense. Getting early night makes sense. Attending a course makes sense. There must be an option that the examiner wants me to choose. So chancing it, hoping that you're going to be lucky and you're only going to get the best questions on the best topics you always dreamed about. That is probably not a realistic expectation. And as we're asked about things not appropriate when it comes to preparation for the exam, chancing it is clearly not that approach. So do spend that second, read the question requirements carefully, see those little words to make sure you have a better chance of highlighting the right option in the exam. Let's now move on and have a look at the second technique. How do we eliminate clearly the wrong answer? So now we've learned we need to read the question requirements carefully, and we're looking at the type of an organization that focuses on maximizing shareholder wealth. So we're thinking, okay, shareholders, I've heard about shareholders, those are owners of companies. They also want to get a return in terms of dividend, in terms of share price increases. So what could possibly be wrong? So let's look at the options we're given. Ministry of Transport, children's charity, construction company, and a building society. You go, okay, so when we talk about shareholders, we know that Ministry of Transport is a public sector organization, and public sector doesn't have shareholders. We know that charities are not focusing on maximization of anybody's wealth at all, because they're there to help those in need. So those two things are clearly out. So we have two options left, construction company or building society. Go, not quite sure about the building society, but we do know that only companies have shareholders. So that makes C the right answer. So by eliminating the answers that are entirely wrong, Ministry of Transport or charity don't have shareholders, you have a better chance of getting the right answer. You now only have two options remaining. And then by using a little bit of knowledge, linking their shareholders and the companies, you're going to be able to gain that mark for the correct answer. Let's now look at distractors. So distractors arise when there are certain wordings in the options or the wording in the scenario that makes it very difficult for us to realize what examiner is actually getting at. So there is a company called Garment that produces a variety of textiles, sells it to retailers. Let's now see what we need to know about that company. Which of the following would cause a decrease in company's willingness to supply its products? So we need to think about the meaning of the saying, okay, so companies supplying its products, clothing and textiles, what would decrease our willingness to supply those products? So something needs to happen that makes our company less willing to make those textiles and clothing. Let's now look at the options. So sometimes examiner designs the option in a way to make them look similar. So both options A and B start with the word decrease. Both options C and D start with the word staff. So let's now have a look at them and go, okay, what clearly does not make sense? So option A is saying, if we decrease the level of tax charged by the government, would that also decrease the company's willingness to supply its products? If we pay less tax, therefore the company will make more profit. And if it's making more profit, it has an incentive to continue. So that clearly is not what examiner is looking for. Our option B, if we decrease the production costs due to automation, again, if costs fall, our profits will go up. And as a company, we want those higher profits. So that could not possibly be the right answer. We have only two options left: staff willing to work flexible hours or staff expecting a significant pay rise. So we're still going, okay, both are to do with staff, but what could staff do to decrease our willingness to make those textiles and clothing? If staffs are flexible, that's normally a good thing for the company. With the flexible staff, the company would be able to make more. So if it's a good thing, it should not decrease our willingness to make our products. But if staff want a pay rise, that makes it a bit harder for us to sell our textile and clothing at a reasonable price. We might need to have to increase our prices to sell our products, and therefore we will have to sell less of the same product. So staff willingness to work flexible hours is not going to negatively influence our ability to supply our products, but a significant pay rise could significantly increase our costs, and therefore option D becomes a right answer. So when you're looking at the options, there could be some distractor options, options that are deliberately worded in a similar way. But if you take your time, if you consider carefully what those options are aiming at, you are more likely to spot that right answer. Let's now consider how to make that educated guess. We know that in our objective test exam, every single question must be answered, even if it's sometimes just a guess, because by guessing, you have a chance to guess it correctly and therefore increase your marks. If you guess it wrong, no big deal. Yeah, there is no negative marking in the exam. So let's look at the situation and think about how should we guess? What is the logic behind guessing? Apparently, we're told about a hotel that is undertaking a refurbishment of its premises. We're told about the activities in that refurbishment, their sequence and the duration in a table, but we're asked to work out the overall duration of the project. Lots of numbers are given to us, so let's try to look at those options and go, are they realistic or not? I'm sure by looking at those options, you can strike some out straight away. So if you consider option A, could our project take 12 days? Yes, I could see that activity C, laying the flooring, takes 12 days, but this is one of many activities in our project. Therefore, the whole thing probably will take longer than 12 days. So option A is clearly out. Let's now look at option D, 42 days. So if I total together all of the activities, I go 8 plus 10 plus 12 plus 6, I get only 36. So this is way in excess of the sum of the durations. That cannot be. The project cannot be longer than the duration of all of its activities. So that's clearly out. And therefore, by eliminating two options that are clearly wrong, I have a 50-50% chance of guessing it correctly. But if I use a little bit more logic, I might be able to get it completely correct. So I have the choices, either 26 days or 36 days. So now I could look at the information in a little bit more detail and see what is going on with those projects. So apparently I'm told that activities B and C are happening pretty much at the same time because they are happening after activity A has been finished. So they're happening simultaneously as such. Yeah? So I have 8 days for activity A for sure. I have 6 days for activity D for sure, and maybe something for B and C, but as they're happening simultaneously, that probably will be taking pretty much the same amount of time. So 8 plus 6 plus roughly 10 or 12 is going to give me a number closer to 26 days. I may not know for sure, but 26 looks like a more correct option if I use a bit of logic. So I don't need to know much about project management, but I have eliminated those two options that are entirely unsuitable. And using simple educated guess, I can derive on average how long that project is likely to take. Let's now move on and also think about dealing with wordy questions. Time management in the exam is frequently an issue. So as a result, it's important to cut through this wording to get to the bottom of the question as soon as possible to be able to attempt all of the questions in the time given. When you're dealing with a very wordy question, what you want to do is to fast track yourself to the essence of what it is that the question is asking about. And for that, I would advise you to quickly look at the requirements line. So this line of the requirements is asking us which one, we're only looking for one option, of the qualities of good information is lacking. And again, by lacking, we mean something is missing in that report. The information in this report is not of a good quality. Let's find out why. So we're told a long story about a car manufacturer. Apparently, that report is to do with environmentally friendly cars that is developing. There was a research consultancy making this report, and they looked at lots of aspects of the industry. They looked at the trends. But when senior managers of Alpha were presented with a report, they said it's extremely detailed and filled with jargon. So straight away I go, okay, that's what's not right about this report. It's extremely detailed and filled with jargon. and therefore the report is of low quality. So straight away, I could link the qualities of this report with the fact that it's low because of the extremely detailed report filled with jargon. So all I need to do now is to find which of the answer options links to those details and the jargon. So relevant, I go, that report seemed to be relevant. It talked about the current history. So clearly relevancy expectations have been met. Complete, because report is so detailed, probably there is too much information in there compared to what they needed to have. Timely, there is no mention at all of any deadlines or timelines, no complaints about the late submission of the report. But if the managers are struggling with detail and jargon, this is because they're struggling to understand that report. The content of this report is not easy to digest, and therefore the understandable criterion is lacking from that report. So when you're dealing with wordy scenarios, find that requirement line first, understand what it is you're looking for in that wordy scenario, and then it will be easier for you to identify that information, easier for you to then tie that information to the available answer options. Let's also think about the importance of moving on when it comes to attempting questions in the exam. There will always be that question when you look at it and go, I just have no idea. We do remember that an answer must be selected for every option, but there may be an odd question you're not comfortable with. So we need to make a choice, even if the choice we're not comfortable with at the moment, because later on in the exam, when you've got a moment, you can always come back and change your mind. You could flag up the question for review, but if the time runs out and you haven't made this choice, that means you have no chance of getting the marks. You have no chance of getting the answer correct. So always make the choice, always tick a box, flag a question up, and then come back for review. So let's have a look at this question and understand, okay, what might be the complexity there? So apparently independent auditors told the company that its financial statements do not give a true and fair view, and you go, true and fair view, heard about it, not quite sure, but I know it's important. So we need to think about the consequences of this for the company. Because true and fair is an important thing. If our accounts do not give a true and fair view, it probably means that those consequences will be bad. Something negative will happen to the company as a result of accounts not giving true and fair view. So when I'm going to be reading those answer options, I'm looking at the negative consequences. If I look at the option A, bank more willing to lend money, I don't see that as a problem. Banks willing to lend is a good thing, but my consequences must be negative. So therefore A cannot possibly be the right answer. If I look at option B, staff have greater confidence in company's future. Again, that's a positive, and I'm looking for a negative. That cannot be the right answer. So I have two options left. C, having to find new audit firm next year, possible, or D, possibility of fines by tax authorities. Which of those options it might be? And though I may not be too sure at the moment, I need to make a guess and go, okay, tax is an important issue. It is an accounting exam at the end. So as a result, maybe I just tick D for the moment. And then if at the end of the exam I've got a moment, I'll come back and think about it again. But if not, at least I gave it my best shot. I've logically considered what options are or not likely to relate to the question requirements. So if D is as good as I'm gonna get it, that's fine. I'm happy that I have made that choice. Finally, let's now think about our study tips. What should we do as part of our revision to make sure that we're on track with the exam? As you could see from the examples of questions I've given to you, high quality materials are essential to helping you prepare thoroughly for your exam. Kaplan provides accredited materials for all accounting qualifications, and therefore you're going to be looking at the right types of questions on the right topics that will help you to get through. Some students prefer not just the materials, but a distance learning option. So when you need a little bit of help and support, you can contact a subject expert with your questions. Or for those students that prefer videos, I'm sure you're one of them, there is also an on-demand option that helps you to have this interactive element as well. If you are attending a course, classroom courses are great for the group support because you'll be together with other learners, you'll be able to share your experiences with them. And sometimes when you're stuck on the topic, you'll figure out that there may be some other students that are also struggling with this topic. So together, by joining forces, we'll be able to overcome those difficulties. Live online classes are, of course, great for those that need flexibility in their learning, and you could study anywhere, whether you are in the office, whether you are abroad, your studies should never fall behind. Finally, do remember about the importance of booking your exam. With many objective test papers, you could sit the exam at any point, but for many students, that means that they delay sitting this exam, so it never happens. Once you book that exam, you will see that your intensity of revision increases. You have this purpose and this deadline you're working towards. And once you have a clear goal in mind, you're much more likely to achieve this goal. You put more effort towards working to this goal. And to make sure that your work towards the goal is effective, do practice lots of questions. So our Kaplan materials contain lots of questions in the exam kit. We also have a lot of questions on My Kaplan, our online study portal that support our students preparing for objective test exams. As those objective test exams are likely to be set on the computer, practicing the questions on the computer puts you in the best position to be able to pass. Brilliant. I'm hoping you have enjoyed this session on the key exam techniques, and hopefully one day we're going to be able to meet in class, whether it's online or physical class, so we can continue our conversation. Lots of luck in your exam.